Hey guys, what's going on? Blaine back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about I Am All Girls. I Am All Girls is a South African crime film that revolves around two women, one of them being a detective and the other being a forensic scientist. They both happen to work at the same police station, and they're both trying to uncover a massive sex trafficking ring in the heart of Johannesburg. We see right from the beginning of the movie that these two characters get along very well with each other, but there's something that one doesn't know about the other, and that's the fact that the forensic scientist also happens to be a serial killer of pedophiles. So there's a consistent sense of tension that's floating throughout this movie in the sense that the detective, Jody, has to nail down that trafficking ring, otherwise she's in danger of losing her job. So Jody comes to rely on Ntobi, the forensic scientist, quite a bit in this movie. The problem with that, however, is that Ntobi has to juggle her double identity as a serial killer and a police employee at the same time. And I really like the duality and just in general the overall relationship between the two and how it changed over the course of the movie when they were together trying to solve the mystery. As far as individual personalities go, however, I'm a bit more mixed in opinion. I will start by saying Ntobi was a fantastic character. She just had a great arc from beginning to end. We really get a sense of why Ntobi does what she does, specifically in terms of being a serial killer of pedophiles and why she scrawls the initials of their victims' names on their chests that they had sexually assaulted or in more extreme cases end up killing. And you really get an idea of what her personal sense of justice is compared to the work that she does at the police station. I also like that there were a lot of flashbacks in this movie that showed just what life was like for Ntobi as a child. I'm not going to get into too much detail about those scenes in this review, but when you watch them unfold in this movie, you really come to understand what her personal motivations are, even if you don't end up fully agreeing with what she ends up doing in the movie itself. Jody, on the other hand, I found wasn't quite as strong of a character. She's certainly not bad by any means, but she just can't hold a candle to Ntobi in terms of personality and overall development. She doesn't really have that much development going on in the movie anyway, aside from the last 20 minutes or so. And then throughout the rest of the movie, she's trying her absolute best to bust the sex trafficking ring, which makes sense because that's the overall point of the story, but she is so consistently bad at her job. It feels like every time she finds a lead, she always ends up falling 2 steps behind whoever she's investigating in the moment, and after seeing it happen so many times, it really got frustrating to watch, especially since most of the time when she falls behind, it's totally her fault. There's more than one occasion in this movie where Jody goes against protocol and she tries to take matters in her own hands, which understandably ends up setting back the investigation when she ends up making a mistake, and this increasingly pisses off her boss throughout the movie, who I ended up sympathizing more with than Jody in the long run. In terms of helping move the plot forward, her character isn't really all that bad. It's just severely lacking in complexity compared to Ntobi. I think that her actress did a fantastic job with the material that she was given at the time, especially when there's scenes where she has to review pedophile videos of you-know-what happening on camera, and just seeing the pain written all over her face made my heart break in two for her. This leads into my next part of the review, where I'm going to talk about the biggest elephant of the room that relates to this movie, and that's how children are put into trafficking rings to do you-know-what. I'm going to try to limit as much to what I have to say about this movie as possible because I don't want YouTube to come down on me with the ban hammer, but just so you know, the subject matter that relates to this movie is very intense. I think the movie did a great job in the handling of its material in a delicate manner, both referring to what happens in the movie itself as well as what ends up happening in real life as well. It's not really explicit in terms of what happens on camera, but rather what happens off camera as you see the reaction of the police officers' faces whenever they have to review the footage that they have to witness in order to help proceed their investigation along. And it's not just about what happens on those video cassettes either. Like I said earlier, there's a lot of flashback scenes in this movie that often show these girls that are being trafficked around in tight quarters, like they might be in the bed of a pickup truck or they're in a shipping container. They have no way of seeing the light of day, as well as knowing exactly what's going to happen to them. And I want to make it abundantly clear right now that these are some of the most disturbing scenes that are featured in the movie. Like I said, there's nothing explicit that happens on camera, but when you see the pained expressions on these girls' faces whenever they're rescued and they have no emotion to display whatsoever other than the tears that are constantly streaming down their cheeks, that says more than any line of dialogue ever could in that situation. While I thought that this movie handled those scenes masterfully and did a great job at providing a voice to the voiceless, I also thought that those scenes ended up becoming a little bit repetitive at times. Most of this movie's story goes like this. Jodie goes to investigate something and either can't find anything or makes a mistake, which prompts Natomi to pick up the slack where she left off so that she can finish that part of the investigation properly. This exact kind of situation happens like 3 or 4 times while watching this movie, and it feels like it's just trying to get a big emotional reaction out of the viewer every time something tragic happens with children on camera, and it just got really old by the time the movie was nearing the finish line. Aside from those bits of the story, there were a few other parts that I thought didn't really make all that much sense, like the fact that Natomi is a serial killer who also happens to be employed at the police station, and for some reason nobody suspects that she's the one behind those killings that's helping proceed the investigation along. I don't know, that just seemed weird that they never suspected her to be involved in anything. I mean, they do suspect someone at the station to be involved in the killings, but they never explicitly investigate anyone at the station. They just kind of mention it in dialogue and then forget about it pretty soon after. There's also a weird romance angle going on between Jodie and Natomi throughout this movie, which, don't get me wrong, is absolutely fine, but the way that it's presented just feels really undercooked. They do a few fun things together, like going to bars and having drinks and then hanging out at each other's places, so you know that there's some sort of relationship that's there, but they never fully commit to it. There's nothing in the way of intercourse or even kissing. They don't kiss once at all in this movie, yet by the end they're completely professing their love for each other, and the way that it all happened just felt really rushed and just not right. Despite this movie having its fair share of weird story bits, however, I have to say that the action scenes did a great job at offsetting the overall weirdness of certain parts. The gunfight scenes are intense, and they usually occur in some dirty, grimy part of Johannesburg, which I felt just added to the overall aesthetic of the whole thing. There's also a few car chases that are thrown in for good measure, and they usually follow up after some boring part of the movie is finished. So even though this movie does drag along in parts of it, there's also bursts of entertainment here and there. Overall, I Am All Girls is a decent enough movie, but it feels like a mixed bag. The two characters are complete polar opposites from each other in terms of quality. In that sense, it feels like there's two halves from two completely different movies that are put together here, one of them being great and the other not so much. If you want to watch a really dark and intense crime film, can handle the unapologetic presentation of its subject matter, and you don't mind some of the silly parts of its story, then I think you might be able to find something to gain from watching it. I admire the social message that's behind this movie, but its lackluster narrative and protagonist left me wanting a lot more than what I got. Anyways, guys, that's going to wrap up my review of I Am All Girls. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the Indian comedy Sardar Ka Grandson. Bye-bye.